Hello everybody, welcome to the first in-depth episode of the year. So 2018, we got 23, I think, if I remember correctly, we got 23 in-depth episodes done. Now, we're probably going to be getting quite a bit done here today in this video with the spinnerbait. Might be filming two videos. I actually have two rods with me. I have this one and the one, I have my Black Max combo right there. So I don't know if we're going to get two videos done. I posted two videos yesterday, which actually was today, but when you guys are watching it, it'll be yesterday. But today, I am filming one video, maybe two, don't know. Today we're going to be talking about how to fish a spinnerbait. Now, I've made an in-depth episode on spinnerbait before, in the past. It was actually the very first in-depth episode I ever did, was on a spinnerbait. And it was in these same kind of conditions. Muddy water, cold weather, not really expecting to catch anything today, just like I was that day, but we were out here attempting to catch a fish anyway. So the trailer I have on here, we'll show you guys the whole setup. This is a Strike King bloody chartreuse and white spinnerbait, big gold blade with a little silver blade, white Dock Sewer Company 3-inch grub, Berkley Lightning rod, 6'6" medium heavy is what it is. And I got my Granite Outdoors bait caster here. So basically, the whole idea of a spinnerbait, the way that I like to fish them anyway. Now you guys probably can't tell, but the water has sort of cleared up a little bit. It's not as chocolate milk really bad as it was yesterday. You can actually see some of the things in the water that you couldn't yesterday. But we're going to talk about how I like to fish spinnerbaits, and we're going to kind of talk about how I mainly would fish them in certain times of the year. So my favorite two times of the year for a spinnerbait, thought I had a fish on for just a split second. I thought I had a bite, but maybe it wasn't. That kind of felt weird. But anyway, so the main two times of the year that I fish a spinnerbait, if I ever fish a spinnerbait, is A, when they are schooling on shad out deep during the summertime and fall, and B, which honestly, B is probably my number one time of the year to throw a spinnerbait, pre-spawn. Pre-spawn is, in my opinion, the keyest, that's not a word, is it? The best time to throw a spinnerbait is pre-spawn. The reason why I say that is because the fish are moving, they're looking for meals, they're looking for easy meals, they're looking for food. And what are you trying to imitate here? With a spinnerbait, you're trying to imitate food for them bass. So, in my opinion, the spinnerbait shines, like I said, in my opinion, it shines the most at the pre-spawn time of the year. But some people may have a different opinion on that. You can think whatever you want to think. I'm just telling you my opinion on the subject. So where I traditionally throw a spinnerbait... Is it raining? Don't tell me it's going to start raining as I do a video. Don't know. Yep, it's... Is it? Every once in a while I see a little ripple on the water. I don't know if that's a small particle of dust hitting the water or if it's rain or what. I don't know. But anyway... So the main places that I throw a spinnerbait, mainly, I'm going to be mainly talking about pre-spawn, because down in Texas, there's some places that they're already spawning, which honestly have completely surprised me. So that means that some places are also going to be pre-spawn. If they're already spawning in some places, they're definitely going to be pre-spawning in a couple places as well. So, wanted to get this video out as soon as possible. So when I throw a spinnerbait pre-spawn, these are the main three things that I do. I find an area, now there's a pond that I've fished before, you guys have seen many videos there. I've caught a lot of fish out of that pond over the years. My biggest 4 fish and 5 fish limit have come from there. I've won many of little mini tournaments. I've won a bunch of those little miniature tournaments that me and my dad done at that lake. I think I've only lost one of those tournaments there. Which we only bet for like $5, so it's not like I lost a whole lot. But I think I've only lost one and won the rest. I don't know how many we've done, but I used to do pretty good on this one area. This one area I found out early on in my bass fishing career when I went to this place, that if I targeted these fish on this one area, that I would almost every single time I'd catch a fish, at least one. If I didn't catch at least one, then I would just walk down the bank a little bit further and cast back to the same area and end up catching one anyway. So I went down to this area, and basically what this area is it's the perfect scenario for a shallow water largemouth bass fisherman. If you like fishing for largemouth, you like fishing shallower water, you guys will know exactly how I'm talking about in this area. So basically what it is if you walk down the bank, if you're walking from east to west, or no, from west to east, excuse me, you'll be walking from the west to the east down the bank, sort of like this right here. How it's doing is when you walk, there's a willow tree that comes out on a small point right here. You walk around the willow tree, you go up, there's another point that protrudes out further than any other point on the water, on the whole entire pond. Hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Had a loop in my line, making sure I wasn't going to get a bad backlash. But anyway, that point, basically what happened off that point is if you stood on that point and then you took a bait, no matter what it was, and you casted, like I'm standing on the point right here, if you casted this way, it was somewhere around the area of 10 to 15 feet. You cast it over here, it's all 3 feet for a long ways. You had to have a really heavy bait and a really easy casting rod to make it to the deep water again. It was that big of a flat. And the flat was pretty much all between 1.5 feet and 2 foot deep. That's pretty much all it was. There was no super crazy changes in the depth or anything. It's pretty much all 2 to 3 feet of water. Now, if you know how bass pre-spawn, then you already know this. But if you don't, basically what bass do in the pre-spawn is they feed up in the middle range of water. They don't go out deep. So every once in a while you can get on a deep bite. Hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that. But every once in a while you can get on a deep bite, but it's very rare. Most of the times you'll catch them in that area under 10 feet at least, depending on how deep the ponds and lakes that you fish are. You know, if you got areas where they're 30 feet deep water, then you'll probably be catching them, you know, somewhere around 10 feet. But if you got areas like I do that are at the most they're 10 feet, 10 to 15 feet, you look for the areas that are around 3 to 4 feet deep and maybe even 2 feet. So basically what them fish are doing when they're sitting up in those areas is they're waiting for bait fish to swim up on that flat. And when they do, then bass ambush them. And it's an easy meal for them. They can pick them off one by one and not have to worry about anything. So I've caught a lot of fish on a spinnerbait this time of the year, on a chatterbait, a swim jig, and a swim bait. Those are my main baits this time of the year. Now when I'm fishing flats, I do not fish a square bill. And the key reason is most of the time in my area, there is so much grass on the bottom that if you went to throw square bill, as soon as it touched the bottom, it'd be covered in grass and you're basically just going to be pulling in a 20-pound grass pile. That's pretty much what happens when you're throwing a square bill in most of the ponds that I fish. Oh my god. Oh my god, there's a fish right there following my spinnerbait. There's a leaf on it too. There's a fish following the spinnerbait right up here next to the bank. Holy crap. Oh my god, dude, no way. If he followed it, he was right here following my spinnerbait and it got bogged up on a leaf and he moved. Okay. Alright. That's nice. I like that. But anyway, where was I at? The fish like to be up in the shallows eating the bait because the bait can't really go anywhere. And when they're eating them, they're also gaining weight. And the reason why they're gaining weight is because during the spawn, especially the males are especially bad about this. is they won't eat. Now, a lot of people think that when people are spawn fishing, they're getting the fish to bite because they want to eat it, but that is not true at all. It's actually the exact opposite. They don't want to eat. They just want that bait off of their bed. They don't want that bait to be on their bed anymore. They're super duper territorial fish. And when they see that bait on that bed, they basically just pick it up to move it, because obviously fish don't have hands and they can't pick it up and move it, so they have to use their mouth. And when they use their mouth, they pick it up and then you hook them. That's pretty much the whole deal with that. So when you are throwing baits during a pre-spawn, you want to imitate something moving. That's why I almost exclusively throw moving baits during this time of the year. My fountain there in the water just came on. But anyway, like I was saying, I almost exclusively use moving baits. Now, if there is a lot of grass on the bottom, I will show you a huge tip right here that I use to catch fish. And this is a tip that you can use during the spawn when you're just trying to find a fish. This is a tip that you can use almost any time of the year except for like winter and fall. When the fish are super shallow in the warm water, this is a huge tip. I've caught fish out of this pond doing this exact same thing I'm getting ready to show you right here. Watch this. Cast it out, put my thumb on the reel. And it didn't really work that time. Show you this one more time here. You cast it out, put your thumb on the reel, and as soon as it hits the water, you start pulling back. You pull your rod tip back. You keep that rod tip as high as possible, and you just pull the rod back to you. And what that's doing is that as soon as it hits the water, that makes that bait start rotating. That spinner, that blade is rotating. And when it's doing that, that's an instant trigger for any bass that are in like a 2-foot radius of that bait. There we go. But that's a huge key. I've caught so many fish that I probably wouldn't have caught if I hadn't have done that by doing that. I casted right up there, and that is a very good technique when you're fishing flooded, muddy water with a bait just like this one here. Chartreuse and white with a big gold blade. That is a huge deal when you're fishing flooded water that has a lot of bushes and stuff. You cast right up there, put your thumb on the reel, and you just keep it moving. As soon as it touches the water, you want that bait to be moving. You want that blade to be rotating. You want that skirt to be pulsating. You want that trailer to be moving. And that can help you catch some big fish. I've seen people do that and catch some big fish. Now, another key, I actually watched a guy on TV. Actually, there's two guys, Mark Zona and Jason Christie, doing this last night on Zona's Awesome Fishing Show, one of my favorite fishing shows there is. They were fishing, guess when? The post-spawn, or pre-spawn, excuse me. They were fishing the pre-spawn. What they were doing was they was finding bushes, much like this one here, and they were flipping them up, and as soon as it would hit the water, they'd start moving it, just like I showed you. That's what they were doing. They were using big Colorado blade spinner baits in muddy water, fishing for those post-spawn or pre-spawn bass. I don't know why I keep saying post-spawn. Now, this is a tactic that I've seen quite a few people win some big money tournaments doing, is flipping a spinnerbait, and a chatterbait is also a decent bait. Now, it's not as well known for this way of fishing. Spinnerbait is definitely one of the more notable baits to fish flipping like this. There was a guy, I don't remember the guy's name, but it was an FLW tournament, and they were fishing in some super duper clear water, like I'm talking, 3-foot visibility. And he was using, I believe it was actually this same style spinnerbait right here. Big Colorado, or big willow blade, chartreuse, red and white skirt. And he was basically just flipping it right around treetops in this super clear water. And he was slow rolling it. As soon as it hit the water, he started moving it. And you would see fish come up just like you wouldn't even see them, and then all of a sudden they were there on that spinnerbait. And that's what he was doing. He was flipping those trees, getting those fish to react. Now, another big myth when it comes to spinnerbait fishing. Now, I've never really heard a whole lot of people talk about this other than me. I don't know if people do this and if people have ever had luck with it, It's something that I've had a lot of luck with. The biggest fish I ever caught on a spinnerbait was doing this. So I was buzzing across the surface, just under the surface, and my blade popped. You guys can see when it's spinning, that blade comes up and just rolls over and lays on the surface. When it does that, a lot of people will say that it ruins the cast and it ruins that area, especially if you're fishing tight to cover. Don't ever do that. If you're fishing a spinnerbait and it comes up right next to a little bush, just like that, and you're slow rolling it right up next to the surface, and all of a sudden that blade comes up and just lays on the surface or pops the surface a little bit, just like that right there, don't worry about that, because I caught the biggest fish on a spinnerbait I've ever caught. It's about 3.5 pounder. I caught that fish doing that with a spinnerbait. I was throwing a small, what was that spinnerbait called? Mini King spinnerbait by Strike King, using a little bitty spinning rod, and I was casting it down the bank, like I'm talking super close to the bank, like probably only maybe a foot off the bank, just under the surface, like you can see the V from the whole entire cast. And all of a sudden, right about maybe 10 feet off the bank, that blade came up and hit the surface. And as soon as it did that, that fish came up out of nowhere and nailed it. And I hooked it, and it was, at the time, it would have been close to my personal best. It was one of the bigger fish I'd caught that year. And I was freaking out. My mom and dad were freaking out because this was like the biggest fish we had caught the whole entire day. And I caught it doing that with a spinnerbait, doing something that a lot of people would say that it ruins a cast. But I definitely disagree with that, because I think it kind of helps with the reaction of the fish. Maybe they think that minnow, that top minnow, because when you're imitating shad with a spinnerbait, you're not really imitating only one singular shad, you're kind of imitating more than one. Depending on how many blades you use on your spinnerbait. I've seen people have like 5 or 6 different blades on one spinnerbait, fishing for those fish that are schooling on big baits, or a big bait ball in the deep water. Now, when you're doing that, and that fish sees that top minnow kind of go up to the surface, that fish thinks that that top minnow seen that bass and is trying to escape. So when he sees that, he instantly want to just kill it. Or they could just swim away. It's a lot like a glide bait. When you're fishing a glide bait for big bass, and all of a sudden you just see that fish come up behind it and you twitch your rod tip and that bait turns a 360 and just looks right back in their face. They have that fight or flight instinct, or as I like to call it, eat or swim away instinct. They'll either destroy it or they'll swim away. Think, oh hey, I've been seen by it, it's not going to bother me, so I'm not going to bother it. Or, hey, that thing moved weird, I'm going to eat it. That's pretty much what they do. So when that spinnerbait breaks the surface, don't believe what they say that ruined the cast, because it definitely doesn't. Another thing that I love to do with a spinnerbait is kind of almost fish it like a jig or a Carolina rig. Let it sink to the bottom and then slowly kind of drag it along. And what that does is it just barely makes that blade move. And you can feel it if you got a good enough rod, you can feel if that blade's moving or not. Like I can feel just those slow, subtle vibrations through the rod of that spinnerbait blade. It also helps to have like a giant number 6 size blade too, but you know, whatever. But that is another great way to fishing. If you ever seen those people fish down in El Santos down in Mexico, they fish spinnerbaits a lot like that. They slow fish them right above the treetops, and I've seen some people catch some pretty darn big bass doing that. Another great tip is if you can, especially if you are on a tight budget, if you don't have hundreds of dollars to spend on spinnerbaits, or if you just have one spinnerbait that they're biting on, they won't bite on any other ones, try not to flip any fish. I mean, if it's really small, like less than a pound, you can go ahead and flip it. But if it's like 2 pounds, 3 pounds or bigger, try not to flip the fish up on the, there's a bite. I just had a huge hit. Something happened. Interesting. Felt like something just grabbed the rod tip and just jerked it real hard away from me. Interesting. I've seen 2 fish. I've seen that one there, and I had this bite here, so that kind of makes me intrigued a bit. But anyway, because if you flip that fish, you take a chance of breaking your wire. And depending on how old your spinnerbait is, you can break your wire pretty darn easy. And if that's the only spinnerbait they're biting that day, then you're going to break it, and there you go, you ruined it. You don't have any more spinnerbaits that they're going to bite. So usually, I'll say usually, depending on the fish, if I catch like a 3 or 4 pounder, I won't flip it, even though, thought I heard something. I heard that. I heard my bait caster mess up. But anyway, I'll usually try to go reach down and lip it. Now, unless I'm super duper excited, sometimes, like you guys have seen me flip like 4 pounders before, sometimes I'll get really excited and just be like, yoink, and just lift the whole thing up and just boat flip it because I don't care at that moment. But if you can, if you're older, like I'm not really all that older, I get pretty excited pretty easily. If you've done it for a while and you've been fishing for a while, and if you have that calm, cool, collected style of fishing that I obviously don't possess, you can take your time a little bit more with it, and you can reach down and pick it up, or you can have somebody net it or whatever. But I think that'll be it for this video. I had 2 fish hit my spinnerbait, which was really freaking awesome. I've not had a whole lot of bites, especially on a moving bait this past month. So I'm pretty excited about that. That makes me a little bit interested in throwing a chatterbait and a swim jig tomorrow. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want some of these 3-inch grubs for spinnerbaits, trailers, or just if you're fishing them on a jig head or whatever, 8 in a pack for $4, no matter whatever color you get. That color there is white. I use white on my chartreuse and white spinnerbaits. So thank you guys for watching once again. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye.